2025 was a year of many events. Most of them were bad. Technology and software became worse, thanks to AI. Products in general have been getting more expensive, and it looks like people around me, regardless of political leanings, are also having a horrible time as well. But hey, those people with they, them as their chosen pronouns are slightly more uncomfortable, so it's a fair trade-off, I guess. Anyhow, a bunch of video games were released last year. Some of them had the decency of not charging $80, making them kind of affordable. To change things up, I'll be discussing my personal favorite game of last year. As usual, I didn't play that many games on release, and I'm pretty sure most people are just curious which game that I liked that the Game Awards snubbed. So, yeah. Sorry in advance to the Expedition 33 fans, if you were expecting a mention of that. Yes, it's Silksong. It'd be kinda strange if that wasn't the case. I was only being obnoxious about it for months on end before the release of the game, and I jumped on the meme of expecting it during a few Nintendo Directs, along with one comical case at one of the Game Awards in the past. So, after all that build-up, does it live up to 7 years worth of hype? Yeah, it does. I could say it's just more Hollow Knight with some extra bits and tougher enemies, though I think that's selling the experience short. People love to bang on about the challenge, but the game has a little more going for it. What's special about Silksong is that it does more with the land of Farloom. Hollow Knight was about exploring a dying kingdom that had fallen to ruins. The game was about preserving what was left by helping the few that remained. Silksong is about going on a pilgrimage across an unknown land. It's not just about the destination of the Citadel, it's about the friends you make along the way. Hornet speaks in this game. A tiny distinction from the Knight, but it plays a role in your ability to become attached to the cast of characters. I mean, early on in the game you meet Sherma, the certified little guy of Silksong, but other characters hold up as well, with most of them I found being a step up from their Hollow Knight equivalent. The lore and environmental design are a massive step up from the first game. Since the land hasn't fully succumbed to ruin, there's a lot more that can be absorbed from the world, especially in the second act. Speaking about the world, it genuinely feels like Silksong is filled to the maximum capacity with ideas that Team Cherry lovingly borrowed from newer Souls games, or from other indie games that made their mark alongside the original Hollow Knight. There's an optional area in the second act that reminded me of Celeste, another goated game in its own right. I mentioned Souls games earlier, and to me, Silksong gave me heavy Bloodborne vibes, mostly from the deceptive environments tied with how fast the combat can get. Alright, the combat. Much has been mentioned about the difficulty because the same gamers that bitch about yellow paint get furious when a game respects their intelligence enough to let them figure out when to turn around and explore the areas for upgrades. That said, there's more to this title than double mass damage, like the combat styles. You can get up to 7 crests in the game that alter how Hornet swings her nail and what equipment she can use at a given time. I constantly alternated between builds, which goes to show how relatively balanced all of them are. The combat encounters are about on par with the original Hollow Knight, but the boss fights are light years ahead of that game. When a giant robot activated out of the blue and that was just an Act 1 boss, I knew I was in for a treat. There's one optional boss that was so good that it basically sealed the deal for me preferring this game to the original. What makes Silksong so special is just how much love Team Cherry added to the experience, to the point where it was maxing out on how much content a game like this could have without feeling bloated. It's not a perfect game. Much ranting has been done about the boss runbacks, the game is a fan of messing with the player for lore-based reasons, the economy is comparable to real life with how little money you're getting from enemies, alongside beads being destroyed if they touch spikes. Enemy gauntlets can get pretty long, bile water exists, yet I was still driven to keep playing with all the great things that the game had to offer. And I know that the inevitable next playthrough is going to be a damn good time. Supposedly, Silksong took so freaking long because the developers kept finding new and unique things to add to the game. I'm hoping that the next title from Team Cherry doesn't take as long, because an experience like this is only leaving me hungry for more. Hopefully there's DLC that adds things like a new area and a boss rush. Hell yeah, baby, let's go! Every blue moon, I play a game that reminds me of why I love video games, and Silksong is one of them. And that's my game of 2025. So why is there so much of the video left? Well, the algorithm is eternally hungry for more watch time, and I like rambling about video games. Since you're all here, let us use this moment to talk about 9 other games that deserved some attention. If you were only here for the funny Shaw spooter in the thumbnail, then here's your jumping off point. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that. But if you're curious as to what other games I'm into, and you aren't familiar with my backlog, then here's 9 other great games that I also played in 2025. The internet is a fantastic medium for sharing ideas around. This especially helped with the niche forms of entertainment like independent animation getting the attention it deserves. Cartoons made by smaller teams that have more freedom than ever since they don't have to pander to TV networks. Just don't ask how consistent their paycheck is. There's a lecture and a half about how not all animation is given the digital circus treatment, but one successful animated series that I'm fond of, Ina, has found a solid amount of success. So much so that Ina went on to receive a game on Steam called Ina Dream Barbecue. What is Ina, the show or this game, even about? That's a good question. One day I hope to find the answer. My best approximation of the Ina experience is what if abstract art that took cues from all over the cultural zeitgeist were given sentience and forced to live with each other. With the web show, it feels like an old game lost to time. Dream Barbecue is a first-person exploration game that has you play as Ina, a character with 2 distinct, well-voiced personalities making their way through this bizarre world. You can complete quests for a collection of quirky characters and experience the vibes along the way. Vibes that fluctuate from fun, to strange, to terrifying, then back to fun. There's only 1 chapter out, but I'm hoping that this game gets more traction for more of this type of content to get made. Also, check out the web show. It's something that's oddly quotable.
Are you drunk again?
Oh, no.
Many classic games have an indie equivalent that was made by someone who wanted to put their spin on an old tried-and-true formula. You see quite a few Metroid or Castlevania-inspired games, but rarely the exploration-type games get a Zelda equivalent. That said, the few times we do see these types of games are noteworthy at least. Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, an incredible name if I've ever read one out loud, is a solid adventure game that also has the benefit of being a comedy game, though it's tonally reminiscent of shows like Adventure Time. Cutesy visuals mixed with the nightmarish undertone of a nuclear disaster. Wait, what was that? Oh right, it's a silly comedy game. Initially I was a little put off by the random JoJo reference and the trailer was way too proud of, but the rest of the game is a little more original. It does feel like these jokes are the collection of what the developers found funny, rather than stuff they just copied and pasted off the internet. Plus, I love the designs of all the food-themed characters. The avocado girl, whose head is the seed and her backpack is most of the fruit, is genius character design. As a Zelda-inspired game, it's pretty fun. It's a lot more stripped back, so don't expect Zelda 1 levels of non-linearity, but do expect all the mechanics to be used to their fullest. One other thing people mentioned was how short it is, but it's kinda like Portal. There's no filler, you just keep moving forward to the next silly part of the game. Maybe with some hidden horrors in a different corner of the map. Apparently, tax evasion wasn't good enough, and Turnip Boy went on to rob a bank, so it's safe to say that with this vegetable-themed adventure isn't in danger of becoming any less unhinged moving forward. I'm not sure what we'll name this climbing game, but I gotta say, what we've made here is peak.
Say that again?
Proximity co-op games, I refuse to use the name Friendslob, have been making the rounds as of late, and for good reason. These games are sold for relatively cheap, and if you can get 3 other friends in the mix, then you're in for some fun moments. If you're TikTok-brained enough, then these games are part of your media landscape, even if it's only secondhand. So what is it like to play one of these games? Pretty fun. Peak comes from the team that produced Another Crab's Treasure, a game that I adore, as well as the devs of Content Warning. In this game, you and your peers crash land on an abandoned island and need to climb to the peak of this mountain to be rescued. The game rewards camaraderie, mostly in the sense that you'll have a higher chance of being able to make it higher with some help. That said, if you die, you can be revived in between the changes of biomes. Though, that's my only knock against the game. It's pretty hard. It's fun, but unless you buckle down, it's gonna be hard to see more than just the opening area. Truth be told, that's the reason why I'm not putting it any higher. It's a fun time, but I don't really see myself actually beating it anytime soon. So to the people asking for games with worse graphics, here's your perfect video game. I'm expecting a ton of comments telling me how more games should look like this than nothing like, I don't know, Persona 5 or whatever. Yep. The modern gamer definitely has their priorities in the right place. Anyhow, I've come to appreciate low-end horror games. These titles intentionally use their lack of fidelity to recreate that feeling of finding some abnormality in an older game and letting your imagination fill in the blanks. A good while ago, I talked about Yuppie Psycho, a title that had solid spooks in spite of its limited graphics. And last year, I played Faith, a game with even fewer pixels to its name, yet in its best moments, it's one of the best horror games that I played in a good while. This game has you play as John Ward, a preacher that has to exorcise many demons that have taken over the local area. Imagine if the Satanic Panic was done over legitimate monsters threatening to kill people and not over kids playing Pokemon or listening to rock and roll. You can tell that these terrors are nothing to mess with since they usually have a cutscene to introduce themselves and can kill you in one hit. Despite the limited graphics on display, the game is visually pleasing enough. Yes, all the backgrounds are pure black, but it makes the few details on the character sprites and the environment feel intentional. Plus, with how limited the overhead sprites look, it makes the transition into rotoscope monsters look all the freakier. Yeah, you wouldn't have thought that this game was using the original Snow White method of animation, but it does. And the spooky monsters are all the creepier for it. The game's sound is entirely done with an old Macintosh text-to-speech sound fonts, leading to an alien feeling for both the enemies and the non-hostile characters. Plus, when things sound jank, it can be really funny. The later two chapters get more ambitious with how they handle things like monsters, the locations, and the split story paths. Chapter 3 in particular is a fantastic experience overall, with how the developer had mastered his craft. This chapter has a level taking place in an apartment complex where you need to travel in the dark without the means of defending yourself. As far as indie horror is concerned, this might be one of my favorite experiences in recent memory. Also, every game in this collection has multiple endings, and I was driven to get them all since each chapter wasn't too long. It's the perfect game to play for Halloween. Ever since I made that one April Fool's video, fishing minigames have become a meme in my corner of the web. Yeah, you think the Eldritch Horrors are the thing that would unnerve me? Psh, freaky fish monsters? Nah. The inability to escape fishing in video games is my existential horror. Dredge is a cute little concept. A fishing minigame set in an Eldritch Ocean. You have a job to do while facing the unimaginable horrors. So basically, it's like working retail. The ocean is basically a hotspot for all of H.P. Lovecraft's ideas of otherworldly creatures and racist caricatures, so being stuck in the middle of it for a whole game opens up a lot of possibilities. Though my only big negative is that the game will play its hand in a predictable way, with some of the scares being telegraphed way too early. I get that these were meant to be avoidable, but it doesn't work if I'm not even falling for the spook the first time I see it. Thankfully, a few of the other scares were less obvious, and a few of the subtle bits still hit home. The thing that I was impressed by is the amount of variety with the types of freaky stuff in each area. Functionally, these are all the same biome, but the gimmick of each location kept me on my toes. It almost has a Metroid feel with how you go into a foreign territory before getting a ship upgrade to be able to traverse the dangers of that environment. One area that stands out has crystal clear waters, which sounds like a beautiful sight, and it would be if going in the body of water didn't have me staring into the mouth of a large tentacled beast. Oh, and the collectible of the area is near its mouth. That's just great. This would be a fairly meditative game if it weren't for the monsters, but the mixture of satisfying fishing mechanics, fish Tetris, and the terrors from the deep give it a unique feel. I'm even tempted to go back to the game and play the DLC if I get the chance. Alright, we're done with the fishing minigames. Now we move on to... damn it all. The internet loves its low-hanging fruits, usually in the form of easily replicated content that's meant to shock the lowest common denominator. Case in point, there's this wholesome thing. Now let's make it effed up. It's great for people that never mentally matured past grade school, but it does nothing for grown adults that like depth. In the last few years, I noticed a theme with some games having a cozy element between action-y bits. Hades lets you customize your home in between runs, and Spiritfarer lets you manage a housing complex between platforming bits. Cult of the Lamb takes the idea of a roguelike dungeon crawler that has you dump all the resources that you find at a level into a town-building sim. Also, you get to start a cult who worships you. I mentioned Hades earlier, and if I were to put these two games next to each other, I'd argue that Hades has the better combat loop, but Cult has the superior housing system. You not only get to manage your whole town and how it looks, but also you have to manage everyone that lives in it, with all the elements building up to you powering yourself up for the next dungeon crawl. Plus, all the extras are pretty nice. I mentioned fishing, but there's also a dice rolling minigame, some extra side characters to interact with, and the sex update. I just like the fact that there was an update that adds sex to the game, and the devs weren't even trying to be subtle about its inclusion on social media. It's amazing. How's the saying go? Birds swim, fish fly, my upload schedule is inconsistent, and the Thousand Year Door fans love to complain. That said, I finally played the Switch version of TTYD, and I get it. Not to the extent where I'm hating on games like Super Paper Mario for being different, but I get why Color Splash got the initial backlash that it did. The original Paper Mario answered the question asking if Intelligent Systems could hit the same high notes that Squaresoft did with Super Mario RPG. The Thousand Year Door tackles the idea of taking the standard Mario cast and putting them in the craziest situations the writers at the time could come up with. It starts off as a normal JRPG with fighting a dragon, but then you fight in a wrestling tournament, solve a murder mystery on a train, help a town cursed with becoming pigs, and other crazy scenarios. Many of them made me wonder how the team was allowed to put the picture-perfect mascots for Nintendo through all these bizarre events. That scene with Peach and the invisibility potion was worthy of an eyebrow raise, to say the least. Paper Mario has always been funny, but it's refreshing to have a cast of characters that genuinely wants you to be invested in their lives. Admiral Bombery, Vivian, and the Yoshi being personal standouts of the cast, not just for their moves in battle, but I especially love their plot lines they add to their chunk of the story. My only negative is the fact that the battle system feels like an older JRPG, if that makes any sense. The battle system is fun, but there's not much in terms of spice that you'd see with JRPGs around the time. This was a post-FF7 era, yet Mario feels a little bit too standard. If we had this quality of writing in a game with the battle system that you'd find in, say, a modern Atlas RPG, I think we'd have a modern classic on our hands. It's not like Intelligent Systems can't do it, going by the last few Fire Emblem games, so hey, give Paper Mario another whirl. I've been growing to appreciate the publisher New Blood and their catalog of games. If Devolver Digital are the peeps that you go to for violent pixel art games, the New Blood are the people that you go to for high-quality Quake-inspired shooters. And Faith. Ultra Kill needs no introduction, mostly because its fanbase won't let you go without knowing about it, especially if you like Doom Eternal. The other two pillars of this company are unique in their own way. Dusk was the big boy that kicked off the Quake-style revival, and Medieval is the creative sibling that I don't really hear much about. This FPS takes cues from Hexen, a game that I never played, but it had a fun concept of all the guns being replaced with magical weapons. Personally, I saw the stand-in for the rocket launcher that was a staff that shot small planets, and I immediately jumped on this game. The other weapons, like a staff firing homing projectile, a sword that fires wide shots, and a trident that shoots lightning, were also standouts in their own rights, especially when you can power them up to really deliver the hurt. What also stood out were the levels. This game has a great variety of locations between the stages. Each level has their own collection of enemies and a vibe to call its own, so the amount of work cannot go underappreciated. On top of all that, these levels are gorgeous. The art direction is immaculate, to the point where it's easy to forget how pixelated all the textures are. Even the fifth world, which I found to be annoying to play through, was still a visually striking location that stood out in its own way. I had a blast playing through this, to the point where I even got the DLC, and it's just as good as the base game. The designs were a lot more experimental, and I didn't really mind how long the stages were, since that meant there was more of the game for me to play. I love it when a game pleasantly surprises me, and this game hit a sweet spot in terms of all the things I enjoy from these retro-inspired shooters. As previously mentioned, I played Silksong, with 9 Souls being presented as an alternative for the pretentious YouTuber's perspective. In spite of the 9 Souls ruined insert game for me genre of fans, I have to say that this game is pretty damn good. If Hollow Knight feels like 2D Dark Souls, and Silksong to me feels like 2D Bloodborne, then 9 Souls is akin to 2D Sekiro. Get used to pairing, or get out. I mentioned Hollow Knight just a second ago, and it's pretty clear what ideas were borrowed from that game, but 9 Souls shines with its iterative ideas being added in. Stylistically, this is a nice looking game. Hand-drawn graphics are a visual treat, but this game has its own unique flair. The game moves away from the Gothic architecture to a mix of Chinese mythology and sci-fi. This works well with the story of the game, which is more upfront than the typical Vania-type games. And it's solidly written, especially with the aftermath of fighting the second major boss of the game that showed a willingness to push for something different. Don't be fooled by the art style, this game will find a way to shock you past the introductory twist. Then there's the combat, which hits different from most 2D games of this ilk. You do the typical slash attacks, but it does minimal damage to enemies, and pitiful damage to bosses. To pile on the hurt, you wait for an opening, and drop a talisman that deals burst damage. Parrying attacks gives you more energy to drop more talismans, so get used to the timing. The point where this game went from good to great were the boss fights, which are a step above the rest of the indie space. They feel like a proper test of the mechanics, and the story beats attached to each one was always interesting. One standout moment of the game was a chapter taking place in a hot spring. Yep, they got the hot spring episode, complete with the main character stripping down for a cozy bath. Hell yeah! Actually, this was the chapter where Red Candle Games remembered that they worked on horror games in the past and decided to put the most deceptive horror level in a modern indie game, full-on channeling the idea that video games can be an artistic medium. Plus, the boss fight is just amazing. My sole negative, besides the fact that the true final boss is obscenely hard, is the fact that the major character upgrades are just handed to you at random intervals. It takes away from some potential environmental storytelling, and it's pretty obvious that the hands of the developers are pushing you in a particular direction. But that's about it. Stuff like this and Silksong are what gives me the drive to talk about this medium, and I hope to do more of that in the future. Alright, so this is the outro to the video. I guess I should give the obligatory apology for not uploading more often. Sorry. I usually want to upload more frequently, but real-life obligations and creative blocks always get in the way of finishing up a project. I have a few ideas sitting on the back burner and a few ideas on creative outlets for myself, but I'll hold off on promising things until I'm confident that it'll be seen by the public. Until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a nice day.